Hey, this is the fourth time I've tried to tape this, so man, maybe there's demonic warfare. I don't know. But the story of creation, the fall of man, offers us not only an insight to the nature of God, but I think it gives us a choice, gives us an understanding about what to do, how to choose how we view God. This could be one of the most foundational things in your life on planet Earth. Do you view God as some lofty God that's not concerned with the affairs of men? Do you view him as largely punitive and just trying to beat people back? Do you view him as loving and benevolent and kind? And I'll talk to you about, really, I think there's a reason that we have a natural bent, a natural direction in our heart and in our soul. And I think I'm sure it came as a part of the fall. So let's just go right at it. If you're new to this, maybe take a minute and hear me out, because I'll explain a little bit of the backdrop and go into the scriptures. So in the first few chapters of Genesis, it outlines the creation of the earth, and then this seminal piece, the creation of man, and from man, the creation of woman. And in all of that, it goes right into the fall of man, how we are living on planet Earth now, what our state is, why we have the issues that we have. But let's focus in on that. So whatever the creature was, we call it a snake, that deceived Eve, that talked to Eve. I don't believe it was a snake, because it was walking upright, it was walking erect, and it was sentient and it could talk. And apparently Eve had other conversations. It seems to be that it was chief among the animals, but lower than man, whatever this thing was. And it's in the garden by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the only thing forbidden for Adam and Eve to eat. The only commandment they have, don't do this thing. It's like, they only had one job. But let's look at it closer. So this thing is used as a puppet because behind it is Satan himself, and this thing is cooperating with him and will get punished for it. But ultimately we see that the deceiver is none other than the age-old enemy of you and I, the devil himself. So the point I want to make is that as man was created, Adam and Eve, in the image of God, God endowed them with this this ability to grow and to learn. I believe that they had this enormous capacity to desire knowledge and to figure things out. And that's the very area that Satan, using this beast, deceives Eve. He says that the tree, look at it's desirable that you'll have knowledge. So the first thing I want to point out is that a lot of the strength of sin comes from trying to fulfill a natural desire in a forbidden or an unlawful way. Sexuality is great. It's created by God. It's wonderful, but it has the confines of marriage, so that there's not brokenness and hardship and children growing up outside of a nuclear family. I mean, you get it, but other things too. Knowledge. There are certain things that we want to be innocent about. We don't want to know about. But that doesn't undermine our quest. Like, I feel like God is moving in my life. I can know so much and hear so much. And, if you're like me, you have this voracious appetite for just learning things. And that's a God thing, but Eve fulfills it in an unholy way. She does something that's forbidden. And from that time, the world changes in a more significant way. The nature of mankind changes in a massive way, more than we can ever give credit for. You and I were never meant to live in a world with death. I remember as a young pastor presiding over my first couple of funerals, and there were a couple that people were really close, and one of the people seemed really way too young to die, and I was so like put off by people that were making these trite kind of declarations like, well, they're better off, they're in a better place, and I mean, I get all that, but it's almost like they didn't want to look at the actual thing that had happened. They're already like, we're in the by and by, and I get all that. It's true, but as I was praying about it and suffering in my soul about it, the Lord comforted me and said, none of this was ever meant to happen to mankind. Death was never meant to be a part of our equation. It was never meant to be something that we grappled with. And that came in after the fall with our ancestors, Adam and Eve. Now, first of all, the identity with our ancestors, it's undeniable. The fallout from those actions lives inside of the unregenerate heart, lives inside of mankind. And here's the point I want to make. Moments before the fall, Adam and Eve have a relationship with God that is full of love and trust and fellowship. He meets with them in the garden in the cool of the day. They have no knowledge of their nakedness. They don't, it's just this incredible world. The garden is producing fruit. They have labor that's rigorous but fulfilling. And then moments after, they're full of fear, and the mindset of how they viewed God changes instantly. And that's the thing you and I inherited in our flesh. That without effort, without salvation, without the power of the Holy Spirit, we remain captive to a mindset that views God as wanting to punish us and views ourself as being alienated from him. And I want to say this in a very careful way. It is it's not a good thing, but it's a natural thing for us to view God like that because it came from this account. But when you start to look at God's plan of redemption immediately after the world changes, in such a profound way that's going to last for millennium. It's going to last, that thing has this indelible effect on mankind. God begins to put back in a plan of redemption. And brothers and sisters, that's the thing that separated David from the rest of the people on planet Earth. It said that David had a heart with God. He had this heart because he saw that. He saw that when he made a mistake, ladies and gentlemen, that he at that time needed to draw near to a loving and forgiving God to receive direction and solace and to receive grace from God instead of fleeing. I remember one time as I was praying about it, I really felt like the Lord say, David repented really well. Yes, he had crazy types of sin in his life, but his ability to come back to God and just run to him at his worst time really singles him out. He's the person that God says, I love you, you are special, your heart is for me, and I'm going to make an everlasting kingdom from your descendants. Come on, somebody, because of his ability to see this redemptive work. So in your flesh, in your soul, in your natural mind, in your unregenerated heart, is a hardwiring to believe that God is angry and he's watching over you with a very punitive heart, trying to wait for you to make a mistake. That is hardwired in the character of man since the fall. And so to some degree we have to come and we have to see that being born again, that's a topic for another day, but the most profound change, it's not just words. I went from being one entity, one being, to another being the day I was born again. I'm an eternal being living in heaven with my soul here captive in this body. It's profound. But your new nature is a nature that runs to God. And those two things are battling. And I just want to remind you that you might have had a business that it failed, or you might have done something wrong, or you might have really messed up in a way that seems hard for you to see any way of redemption, or you might be just kind of walking thinking like, man, God is upset with me. I never measure up. I've got tons of problems and sins and all that stuff. And I just want to say, break off raining on that natural tendency and ask God to get a hold of seeing his nature as a loving, redemptive God and run to him. It says we can find grace, we can come boldly before his throne and find grace to help in the time of need. What is the time of need that causes us to run boldly before his throne? It's when we've got problems. That's when we need grace. And it's that time, beyond any other, that we know when we mess up, we make mistakes, that we can run to God because he has already begun a plan of redemption.